the Rampant Lions was founded in late M41 to serve as a bulwark against the expansionist empire of the Xena species known as the Tau. A major reason of their founding lies in the discovery of the formerly insignificant star system known on Imperial star charts as System AO1448 at the beginning of M40. It became of interest to the Imperium after a Mechanicus explorator fleet discovered a previously unknown volcanic planet rich in easily accessible adamantium ore. The Adeptus Mechanicus decided to annex it and turn it into a major mining operation, gradually developing over time into a smaller forge world. Its close proximity to the bordering Tau Empire, however, made it vulnerable to invasion. It was decided that security measures had to be taken. The High Lords of Terra, not having forgotten the lessons learned from the Damocles Crusade, proclaimed that the construction of a chapter monastery in the system and the formation of a new chapter had to begin immediately. The Order of Xenos, already extensively active in the region to stem the expansion of the Tau Empire, took charge of the project and sent a message to the Imperium's finest fortification builders, the Imperial Fists. The Fists answered the call dutifully and began surveying the system to lay the foundations of the new chapter. After their initial scouting mission, the Fists concluded that instead of building a mere fortress monastery, the given threat of the expansionist Xenos justified the building of a mighty citadel. In the most likely event of a full-scale invasion by the Tau, a fortress monastery wouldn't be capable of holding out until reinforcements arrived. In the darkest corridors of the Imperial Palace, there are some who doubt the High Lord's motives. Whispers in the shadows claim that their real interest lies not with the adamantium-rich mining world, nor wanting to hinder the expansionist tendencies of the Tau, but in something far rarer and far costlier, an SDC. During the Damocles Crusade, a Mechanicus explorator vessel performed an extensive orbital scan of the Tau planet of Dal Ith, finding traces of buried ruins dating back to the Dark Age of technology. After the Crusade, the Adepts on Mars pored over the data, analyzing all they could for future action against the Xenos. It was then a surprising detail became known. The ruins showed a clear correlation with similar ruins on Hell's Teeth, a demon world in the Maelstrom claimed to contain an STC library. This rumor could explain Terra's interest in the system and maintaining a well-defended base of operations nearby. It would also explain the large amounts of resources pumped into the founding of the chapter, and perhaps even offer an explanation to the rapid technological progress the Tau have made over the past 1,000 years, but to probe deeper into the matter would be no easy task. It would involve extensive covert operations into enemy territory, and the risk of detection would be high. The possibility that the Xenos would react militarily would be more than certain. Who would be willing to lead such an undertaking, knowing all too well what it could lead to? At the time, the High Lords of Terra were discussing the new founding. The Order of Xenos was deciding what to do with one of their own officers. A Deathwatch kill team captain called Thomas Verhasselt was under scrutiny for his role in a failed operation deep in Tau territory. He was the sole survivor of the classified mission deep into Tau territory, which had gone horribly wrong. Although the nature of this mission remains classified, some believe their task had been to kidnap a high-profile rogue Tau commander known as Farsight. Whether to use as a source of information or to make some sort of pact is unknown. Despite his obvious failure, the captain was eventually exonerated, not in the slightest because of having obtained valuable intelligence from Farsight by biting him during melee combat. Using his implanted omophagia to absorb his memories delivered the Ordo Xenos a veritable treasure trove of intelligence. Given his intricate knowledge of the Tau Empire, his past combat experiences against them, and his intense hatred of the Xenos after losing his entire team, it was decided he would be the ideal candidate. He was quickly given the task of supervising the founding of the new chapter and becoming its first ever chapter master. The High Lords of Terra were not idle in their intentions and issued a writ ordering all of the Imperial departments to provide their full cooperation in the founding. True to their reputation, the Ordo Xenos, Imperial Fists, and Adeptus Mechanicus took the task with heart, flocking to system AO1448 with personnel and material. After close inspection of the system's numerous planets by the Fists, it was decided that the best location for the Citadel was on a desolate death planet simply dubbed Lair. Its naturally toxic atmosphere did not harm the Astartes on account of their genetically modified lungs, but was deadly to all other forms of life due to the high amounts of sulfuric acid in the air. The new chapter master finished the foundations of the Citadel in 10 years, but it would take another 5 decades of continued labor before completion. On Lair, a vast citadel rose from the toxic murk making up its atmosphere. Above the planet, equally impressive orbital defenses watched over the skies. The Mechanicus Forge world had likewise been transformed by the incessantly industrious Adeptus Mechanicus. The volcanic planet, dubbed Dragon's Breath by the colonists, possesses no solid continents. Its close orbit near its sun causes continued violent seismic activity, rendering the surface into a sea of lava. The unique nature of the planet is also one of its greatest strengths. The lack of solid land to settle upon forced mankind to live on giant floating industrial hive cities. Through a combination of ancient repulsor engines and vast inflated asphalt pontoons, these production cities ride the violent currents of the lava sea. The adamantium ore can simply be filtered from the liquid lava, concentrations being the highest near the most violent eruptions and most active lava currents. The Mechanicus used its considerable resources to create floating ore filtration plants, manufactoria, storage facilities, living habitations, and other facilities needed to run the complex mining operation. The floating installations and their migratory nature means that invasion from space is a dangerous option even for the expansionist and technologically advanced Tau. To further hamper any invasion, the system's large asteroid field near its outer reaches was weaponized early on. Here too, the Mechanicus and Astartes used their extensive knowledge and experience in fortification. Vast minefields, orbital platforms, and fighter/bomber bases lay hidden among the cosmic debris, dormant until their time of need. The projection of the system from the Tau has heavily influenced the chapter's combat style. Having had decades to prepare, the chapter master made it the Lion's Creed to learn from the reports of the Damocles Crusade and other battles to counter the enemy's tactics. In order to do this, there are large amounts of mobile and heavy-armed Devastator squads present in far larger numbers than is recommended by the Codex Astartes. Furthermore, the chapter possesses large numbers of assault marines who make up the greatest part of the chapter. The chapter's first company, traditionally armed with tactical Terminator armor, focuses mostly on hand-to-hand combat, preferring power claws and hammers instead of stormbolters and power fists. Normally the backbone of any chapter, the tactical marines are vastly outnumbered by the specialized troops like the Devastators, Terminators, assault marines, and even an enormous number of armored vehicles, of which many are substandard quality and meant as decoys. Those adhering to the Codex Astartes often wonder what tactics these rampant lions use against the Tau. From the reports compiled on numerous combat missions, it becomes quickly clear the Tau rely heavily on their technology and on long-range combat. Their armor depends on advanced scouts, feeding them firing coordinates. During the Damocles Crusade, this tactic caused heavy casualties amongst the assaulting Imperial forces. The only exception were the mobile White Scars, using their trademark lightning-quick strikes to harry and ultimately destroy their enemies. Understanding mobility and melee being the best way to counteract the Tau, the new chapter quickly adopted a similar strategy. Heavy mobile armor, combined with large amounts of scouts and a focus on the gritty and devastating melee combat, are the chapter's way of combat. The efficiency of the combat doctrine has been proven in their relatively short history, having been involved in dozens of skirmishes and several major battles, having lost few. The rampant lions named their vast citadel the Lion's Den, and to the casual orbital observer, it sticks out at the scarred surface of Lair like a boil on a face. The vast citadel has not been built, but rather excavated from the largest mountain on the planet. Due to its sheer size and powerful void shields, it cannot be destroyed from outer space or air. The citadel is equipped with and surrounded by vast arrays of ground-to-orbit missile silos and turbo lasers capable of decimating any sizable fleet. Hidden surface-to-air weaponry and minefields are everywhere, both on the mountain sides and the chapter's keep as on the neighboring mountains and valleys. Any approaching craft scouting the mountainsides for cover is severely mistaken in its chance of survival. If by some fluke an invasion force should manage to set foot on the planet and assault the lion's den, it'd still be doomed. The valley leading up to the lion's den has been transformed into a giant trap, intended on slowing the invader down so that they can be targeted by artillery. It is well known that the Tau rely heavily on their technology in combat. Advanced cloaking armor, radar, and other scanning devices give them an edge that enables them to target their enemies from afar and avoid minefields or other power-driven sentry guns. The Rampant Lions devise a simple yet effective encounter. The valley surrounding the citadel was first flattened, clearing it of any cover an invading force might use. As a result, the area has been scarred beyond belief by heavy weapons fire. Not a rock remained that wasn't ripped to rubble. Not a clod of dirt left unstirred. Even a river that flowed through the valley had been cut off to remove a source of water for any invading force. The entire surface had been prepared meticulously for a punishing barrage of artillery fire, with no shelter to be found. If an enemy were to invade this planet, they would find no shelter, no breathable air, and no water near the citadel. To slow down any invader trying to scale the citadel, the Astartes seeded the valley and sides of the den with hidden traps. Camouflaged pitfalls filled with wooden stakes topped with razor-sharp adamantium spikes. Dormant volcanic pipes, natural caves and crevices on the side of the mountain are rigged with deeply burrowed containers of promethium, simplified and stripped of all electrical elements to avoid detection. The stone debris produced by the excavation of the citadels inside was carefully deposited onto the mountain. The mounds of razor-sharp stones are rigged with hidden explosives to set off avalanches that would punish any approach with certain death. Not using any mechanical or powered elements, these simple yet effective traps escape even the best of the alien scanners. The lion's den is also extensively equipped with artillery, both hidden and visible. Any force is lucky enough to break through the long-range barrage and reaching the actual citadel is met by thousands of automated heavy weapon installments, many of them clocked until their time of need. But the Astartes are no fools. Even the Imperial Fists, masters of defensive warfare, have learned that any fortification can be breached. Keeping this in mind, they began transforming the inside of the mountain into a vast death trap as well. Tunnels are deliberately cramped and uneven in dimensions to avoid the use of large armored battlesuits that have favor. The passageways are equipped with hundreds of secret doors, automated weapons, and bottleneck fortifications. Many of the tunnels are deliberate dead ends designed to confuse the enemy and reap a deadly toll on them as hidden automated weapons spring to life. Each tunnel is also mined so that it can be collapsed when overrun. Underneath the citadel, so deep in the planet's crust that it is heated by the molten core, lies a series of tunnels meant to be a last refuge in case the den should fall. It also houses the keep's power generators, vast and ancient machines providing its massive power requirements. In the unlikely case the chapter is pushed back into the deepest tunnels and must concede defeat, the generators can be set to self-destruct. The resulting explosion would wipe the citadel and the invading forces off the face of the planet. Despite being of Imperial Fist gene seed, the chapter focuses primarily on the Emperor for spiritual guidance and not their gene sire Rogel Dawn. Overall, they believe the Master of Mankind guides them in battle and directs their hand when striking down the enemy. Most of the new recruits from the chapter originate from the planet Leonis, known by the natives in Low Gothic as Lion or Lioness, and have very strong connections to its local tribal beliefs, most prominent that of the hunter which stalks in the night. Leonis is a feral world in system AO1448 and a home to a few dozen million savage humans, gathered in roaming tribes spread out across the vast planet. Poor in natural resources and distant from Terra, it was considered unprofitable to recolonize or industrialize. Instead, it was handed over to the Rampant Lions as a tithe world the barbaric humans serve imperfectly for their constant need of new recruits. The people of Lioness belong to tribes of nomadic hunters, having slipped back to a Stone Age technological level millennia ago. their primitive hunting society is guided by shamans that has one recurring theme, that of the hunter which stalks in the night. In their local beliefs, it is said that a giant lion-like being, walking straight like a man, stalks the land and hunts for its prey in the night. When its roar is heard, death is imminent and unavoidable. Every year the tribes gather at a place holy to them to hold great hunting trials designed to test the contestants' skills. Those who have proven themselves worthy are given the honor to go out on a hunt to kill the mythical hunter which stalks in the night. The tribes are compensated for the loss of their greatest hunters in furs, food, stone weapons, and other items of religious importance to them. None of the hunters who participate in the Great Hunt have ever been seen again by the tribes, as the chapter chaplains use it to observe and take the best candidates back to the citadel for initiation into the chapter. The tribes erect totems with the carved image of a rampant saber-toothed lion, to which they offer caught prey after their safe return from a hunt, to appease its appetite. Some of the more spiritual recruits have shown a peculiar interest in stories about the Emperor, which they consider as the greatest hunter of them all. Thanks to a small amount of mind and tail-bending by the chaplains, the step from worshipping the hunter to the Emperor is thus a small one and actively encouraged by the chapter chaplains. The chapter itself is also influenced by the belief, adopting a more feral look by wearing the furs of slain saber-toothed lions and animal tokens akin to that of the local shamans. The chapter's first company is completely made up out of Terminator armored marines. Almost all of them are assault Terminators, making most of the Tau's weakness in melee combat. The first company trains extensively to teleport or drop straight into the thick of the battle, wreaking havoc through enemy lines and allowing the rest of the chapter to sweep in and take out whatever resistance is left. They are, however, heavily reliant on scouts or assault marines to provide them coordinates or teleport markers. The chapter's newest recruits come from 2 planets, Dragon's Breath and Leonis. Both have different backgrounds that are ideal to fit the recruitment requirements of the Astartes. As indicated before, the importance of this system lies in 2 rapidly developing worlds. Dragon's Breath, a budding forge world rich in adamantium, and Leonis, a feral world rich in space and thus ideal for grand populations and the supporting agriculture. Dragon's Breath is a volatile volcanic world covered completely in lava. No solid land exists, the planet's erratic orbit around the system's sun throwing it in constant seismic upheaval. The sea of lava is subject to violent eruptions, some so massive that they can be detected from low orbit. Welling up from the very core of the planet whenever there is an eruption, the adamantium ore rises to the surface barely long enough to be fished out. The young men who risk their lives on a daily basis to obtain the ore are called lava sailors and travel across the sea of smouldering heat on asbestos boats. The danger these brave men face are threefold: the heat, the violent outbursts that can topple their ship, and the lava worms. Lava worms are the only indigenous life form capable of living in the hellish conditions of Dragon's Breath. They are vast, worm-like creatures which live in the ocean of liquid fire, their skin so durable it's impenetrable to the heat. These gigantic creatures, some up to several hundred meters in length and dozens of meters in diameter, have been reported to swallow the little boats whole. Some of the more brave, or foolish, lava sailors make a living out of goading the lava worms away from the boats collecting the adamantium ore, firing crude adamantium harpoons at the creatures. On the rare occasion a lava worm is killed or found dead from other natural causes, it is quickly skinned by the lava sailors, who use the durable skin to make protective clothing for themselves. Suffice to say, the young men who man these boats have to be physically at their peak and possess enough courage or madness to supply a dozen ordinary men. Their knowledge of technology, however limited, means the Astartes recruited from this world can often be found in more technical roles, such as tech marines or pilots of the armored vehicles and Thunderhawks. The second source of recruitment is the planet Leonis, the underdeveloped feral world in the same system. This world is comprised of 3 gigantic continents surrounded by oceans, and with the exception of the southern continent, is mostly flat as a bedsheet. It has no cities or settlements to speak of, and is covered in untamed forests in the north, dense jungles around the equator, wide plains and lush savanna to the south. At first sight, this world is ideal for farming and living, which explains the presence of several dozen million humans. They are a backward people who left the path of technology eons ago to live like nomads, roaming the barren plains in small groups. They barely survive, struggling every single day to fight the harsh conditions the feral planet has to offer. The exact reason why these people reverted back to their primitive state is uncertain, for they keep no written track of their history. From their tales and legends, however, one can derive that they were once a highly advanced society with great luxurious cities until a great conflict erupted. The resulting bloody war nearly drove them to extinction, their great cities destroyed, the few survivors left unable to rebuild what was lost. The hunters spent days stalking prey of humongous size named the saber-toothed lion. The animals are indigenous to Leonis, hence its name, and are roughly the size of an ogren or astartes, though male specimens the size of crocs have been sighted. These animals are extremely skilled hunters, and more than often the human hunters become their prey instead. Most of the humans dress themselves in the furs of their prey and use the claws as weapons, strapping them tightly onto their own hands and never taking them off, for it is never certain when one will be attacked. Upon observing this habit, the barbaric tribes quickly deserved the nickname Claws from the Astartes, a name which stuck until this day. The chapter's chaplains monitor the Claws closely in their search for suitable recruits, and the majority of initiates come from Leonis. Due to their background, they serve as excellent scouts and require little training in this regard. When elevated to the status of Astartes, most of the Claws are initially utilized as assault marines, using their skills as hunters on the battlefield. The men of the 10th Company, traditionally reserved for the new assault marines, are therefore aptly known as the Hunters. Some Claws are known to utilize tamed sabertooth on the battlefield, which have been raised and trained in the lion's den. The enormous animals hunt in packs, and though hard to control, can be devastating on the battlefield, combining speed and sheer physical strength. It is even said the chapter master has the largest sabertooth of them all to serve as his personal bodyguard. The most famous battle of the Rampant Lions is without doubt the siege of their citadel by the Tau, lasting for several years. Due to the Great Rift, the exact date varies, but most historians agree it took place near the beginning of 001 M42. The Tau, sensing the Imperium's weakened state, launched several assaults upon bordering Imperial worlds. The Rampant Lions, however, had predicted the increased Xenos activity and were quick to counter. Nearly a dozen smaller and 3 full-scale campaigns took place throughout the first century of M42, frustrating and considerably slowing down the Xenos expansion. Rulers of Imperial worlds were reminded of their oaths to the Imperium by the chapter or completely removed if questions concerning their loyalty arose. But despite the mixture of successes and failures, the news was closing. Extrapolating data from the conflicts and extensive probing by scout ships finally revealed the most likely location of the Astartes home system, and a punitive expedition was planned. The first Tau expeditionary fleet was woefully unprepared for their task. A combination of hidden orbital defenses, Q-ships, and clever tactics made for an easy victory for the Imperial forces. Only a few Xenos ships survived to escape back to their own empire. The astropathic messages going back and forth between the Rampant Lions and the rest of the Imperium painted a bleak picture. Cadia had just fallen. Warcrafts were ripping the Imperium apart, and enemies attacked on every side. Though their remoteness worked to their advantage, it also meant they were a low priority for the Imperium to send reinforcements, and they would need them for what was to come. The Tau would not let the slight of their defeat go, and would return to have their revenge. Chapter Master Thomas Verhasselt therefore concluded that no substantial aid was to be expected, and acted accordingly. Breaking the Codex Astartes, he ordered all of the nearly 200 scouts to be implanted with black carapace, transforming them into full Space Marines. Many more initiates were rushed through their training regime and implantation process. Nearly 100 Lions in the Death Watch were recalled, adding to their already oversized number. Over the course of several months, further reinforcements were gathered. Several nearby systems sent units of planetary defense forces to help, gathering a total of some 12,000 well-armed and trained troops. an understrength brigade of Krieg Imperial Guard carrying a further 5,000 men and equipment limped into the home system of Rampant Lions, offering their assistance. They had been the remnants, a force nearly 100,000 strong, sent to fight the Chaos invasion of Ultramar. The nearby hive planet of Kiln provided further bodies in the form of nearly 50,000 conscripted hivegangers and criminals. Kiln's lifeless moon, Naerina, was the planet's main prison, capable of harboring nearly 500,000 detainees. When gang violence broke out in the underhives and on the prison moon, the governor had no choice but to ask for help. Sensing an opportunity rather than a crisis, a single company of Rampant Lions answered the call. The uprising was brutally ended, and the survivors tracked off by the Lions to serve as penal legionaries, or worse, lobotomized combat servitors. A year after the failed first invasion, a vast armada of ships comprised of Tau, Groot, Vespid, Nikasar, Demiurge, and half a dozen other client races burst into System A01448 in force. When the armada arrived over Lair, they found their enemy had prepared itself well. They also discovered bunching together made them vulnerable for the Imperial Nova cannons. Massive explosions ripped through the Zenith's front ranks, vaporizing smaller vessels whole and damaging even the largest ships. The Tau were quick to adapt and targeted the ships sporting the Nova cannons, completely ignoring the ragtag collection of civilian vessels amongst them. The Tau High Command had little fear of the cargo freighters, supply barrages, merchantmen, carracks and clippers, however numerous they may be. Again, the Rampant Lions had used their enemy's confidence against them. For decades, the Astartes and Mechanicus had scoured the sector for derelicts, emptied salvage yards, seized smuggler and pirate vessels, and in the end, simply impounded a large number of civilian ships and defense monitors from nearby systems. Tech Marines and Mechanicus tech priests had worked day and night to turn the nearly worthless wrecks into Q-ships, defense monitors, system escorts, fire ships, and escort carriers. Gigantic cargo freighters designed to transport vast quantities of plasma opened their side hatches to reveal entire decks of launch bays. They disgorged wave upon wave of fighters, bombers, and boarding vessels. Several of the supply barges had been turned into fire ships, their holds filled with explosives. They lumbered amongst the densest clusters of alien ships and detonated. Merchantmen vessels and carracks had been fitted with hidden torpedo tubes on their prows and cargo holds, the deadly weapons firing nearly point blank into their enemies. Despite all this, the Tau fleet endured, their superior numbers counting to their advantage. As the battle progressed, the Imperial fleet realized they had no choice but to disengage. Supported by the fixed defenses on the planet and moons, they made a fighting retreat to the nearest asteroid field. The enemy fleet quickly took position in orbit over Lair. The true invasion had begun. The sky above the citadel blackened as hundreds of troop carriers and fighters descended. After nearly a week of intensive building up of their forces, the Tau High Command decided to launch the ground assault. Thousands of warriors of a dozen races surged forward on foot, their approach covered by shield drones and heavy artillery. The Imperial forces waited patiently, only now opening up with their artillery. Shells exploded high in the air, dispersing green and black chemical vapors that descended slowly onto the valley, obscuring it with a foul mist. The planet's atmosphere, already rich in sulfur, became a smog of finely powdered charcoal and saltpeter. Using the planet's natural toxic atmosphere and simply adding the two lacking elements, they transformed the valley's atmosphere into a vast, black, gunpowder keg. As the bombardment continued, the atmosphere reached the exact threshold needed to go off across the entire valley. It started as a slow rumble, minor explosions popping and growling across the entire valley, until they started multiplying and linking together. The cascade reached its climax in a massive fireball, ripping through the entire valley. The pressure wave accompanying the explosion wiped everything off the valley's surface, including troops, armor, and landed shuttles. The blast was so intense it could be seen from orbit. In a single apocalyptic moment, the entire invasion force was annihilated. Despite the severe blow and humiliation, the Tau Empire had no other choice but to press on. They could not allow this thorn in their side to continue. A second wave of invaders descended en masse. Nothing could have prepared them for what they found when reaching the landing site of the first wave. A field of stakes had risen where just a few days earlier their comrades had died. Each stake sported a Xenos head, their faces turned away from the citadel. The dead stared accusingly at their living comrades, the eerie silence of the valley intensifying the horrific sight. Mounds of burnt bones had been erected as some sort of twisted tribute to the gods of war and death. A number of them showed teeth marks made by large predators. The few bodies that weren't completely mangled had been desecrated and placed in obscene poses. Morale sank quickly. After weeks of intense bombardment, the Tau managed to overload the Lair's shields. As ground forces stormed the citadel, a rumble rose gradually, intensifying in strength until it finally became clear what it was. A great, bestial roar. The sky blackened and lightning bolts appeared out of nowhere. Static electricity and St. Elmo's fire built up around the largest installations and vehicles. Air pressure increased, accompanied by a loud buzzing that hurt the ears. With a blinding flash and a vast crack of displaced air, 2 Warhound Titans and 3 Knights teleported into the rear of the valley, at the very edge of the enemy camp. The lead Warhound had been heavily modified into the image of a saber-toothed lion. Its feet sported large claws, ideal for ripping through its target with a single kick. Even its warhorn had been changed to let out a feral roar. With all the fighting men and material positioned closest to the front line, they hardly met any resistance as they began ripping through the prefab buildings the Tau had erected to support the invasion. Explosions and screams for help began reaching the frontline Tau troops, who quickly turned around and set towards the new threat with no plan or organization. Covered by the noise of battle and the chaotic retreat, the Tau missed the wave of land raiders, rhinos, predators, Lehman Rosses, and whirlwinds emerging from hidden underground tunnels. The citadel disgorged thousands of PDF, Imperial Guards from the Krieg Regiment, and Skitarii forces to join the battle, which lasted a full day. The battlefield was covered by dead aliens. Amongst them lay the yellow colors of fallen Astartes, lions, wrecked armor bearing the Mechanicus cog, PDF, and Imperial Guard banners. The 2 Titans and 3 Knights lay silent in the ruins of the destroyed camp. They were surrounded by tens of thousands dead enemies. Despite the horrendous losses, the Tau leadership decided to empty the chalice to the bottom. To abandon the invasion now would be political suicide, and they knew it. Thus, a third invasion force descended. Over the course of several weeks, the artillery batteries covering the Lion's Den were taken out of action by lengthy aerial bombardments, artillery duels, and infiltration squads. No further sallies were undertaken by the rampant lions, putting the Tau on edge. Slowly, gradually, they uncovered the entrances into the citadel. Breaching them, however, was another matter. Over the decades, the citadel had been excavated from the mountain and the stone debris had been dumped on the outside of the mountain at strategic places. Each time the enemy attempted to blast a way into one of the discovered entrances, it had set off avalanches that killed many. When they finally did manage to enter one of the tunnels, they were awaited in force. Astartes, gun servitors, PDF, Imperial Guard, chapter serfs, minefields, and stalking saber-toothed lions guarded the interior of the citadel with a vengeance. Most of the tunnels were crammed, too small for the Tau to use mobile artillery or even battle suits. They were forced to rely on their drones, fire warriors, and Xenos allies to enter the tunnels. Though not without merit, they simply weren't equal to battle suits. They paid a high toll for this, dying by the thousands. The Imperial forces played the defense well. gradually withdrawing into the tunnels, sometimes feigning a route that drew the enemy in great numbers into the dark maze of tunnels, only to be surprised by heavy flamer teams that killed hundreds with almost casual ease. When a tunnel was in danger of being overrun, the retreating Astartes simply collapsed it, killing even more foes in their wake. The invasion force was bled dry, forcing them to request more and more reinforcements from off-world. The situation became so dire, the ethereal caste took a surprising decision. They would contact Farsight, the rogue Tau commander who had set up his own empire, and appeal to him for help. Expecting a trap, Farsight sent a small cadre of his trusted officers to survey the situation with their own eyes and report back. From the reports, he realized the Rampant Lion's heraldry matched that of the ships that had attacked some of his planets several months earlier. Intent on revenge, he accepted the request for aid. His first action was to meticulously go over every battle report. Having got a good grasp of the situation, he decided to rob the enemy of their greatest advantage, the cramped tunnels preventing them from utilizing their heavy armor. Industrial drilling equipment was shipped in and used to excavate large tunnels. As they went deeper and deeper, they started encountering Imperial tunnels. The battles that broke out on such occasions were no longer the one-sided slaughters they had been before. Though the humans put up aggressive resistance, the hammerheads and battlesuits evened the odds. The lions were losing ground and kept retreating deeper into the citadel. They continued to hold out, hoping for reinforcements sent by the Imperium. Little did they know, the Imperium was fighting for its own survival as the Great Rift had brought it to its knees. The invasion had been dragging on for nearly a year when it entered its final stage. Casualties were rising even higher as the Imperial forces were being pushed deeper into their own bulwark and fought like cornered animals. They were gradually cut off from each other as tunnels were collapsed at intersections, trapping them throughout the citadel on various levels. In the final days of the invasion, the Rampant Lions found themselves retreating into the lowest tunnels of the citadel. The chaptermaster drew back his available forces, barely half a company of Astartes and a few hundred unaugmented humans. Realizing they were about to be overrun, Chaptermaster Bars invoked the Doomsday Protocol. A tech marine descended into the deepest caves underneath their lair to rig the Citadel's plasma reactors to explode, the detonator rigged to the Chaptermaster's vital signs. Upon his death, the entire den would go up in a massive explosion, taking their foe with them in a final act of defiance. Sealing themselves into their deepest weapons vault, they prepared themselves for their last battle. The Astartes emptied their weapon racks and helped the remaining Imperial Guards of the Krieg Regiment to set up heavy weapons positions covering the adamantium bulkhead. They used anything they could find to build makeshift cover, sometimes even using the bodies of fallen comrades. Next to each man lay a dozen loaded weapons and bandoliers of grenades, nobody planning on reloading when a weapon ran dry. The vault contained thousands of weapons for only a handful of men, so they had ample to spare. True to their nature, the Imperial Guard fixed bayonets on every rifle, preparing for a final charge. The adamantium doors of the vault turned cherry red as the Tau unleashed powerful energy weapons on them, the unbreakable metal slowly melting. When at long last the doors yielded, the Imperial forces unleashed a withering barrage of fire into the opening, throwing up a solid wall of projectiles and las to deny their enemies entrance. Sounds of explosions and cries of dying Xenos echoed from the tunnel. Shield drones kept trying to enter the room, one after another blasted from the air. Grenades and missiles flew up into the vault, killing men and disrupting the defensive fire. An opening in the relentless barrage formed, and heavy battlesuits pushed into the room. The air became thick with smoke and blood. The cries of dying men and roaring lions filled their ears. Not content to be a mere spectator, Commander Farsight entered the melee as well. The Rampant Line's chaptermaster, Thomas Bars, surged forward to meet his alien counterpart. Warriors from both sides instinctively moved aside to let them duel. The alien commander relied on his Dawn Blade, while the chapter master drew an ancient Imperial Fist power sword and activated the Lightning Claw on his other hand. The two leaders fought like men possessed, hate and fury radiating from them as their weapons clashed. Using his unnatural speed, Verhasselt thrust his blade up into Thomas's chest, impaling his primary heart. Instead of going into shock, the chapter master wrapped his lightning claw around his enemy's wrist, preventing him from moving his blade. He brought his face close to that of Verhasselt and vomited a stream of acid and blood onto his helmet, blinding him. With a bestial roar that stopped everyone in their tracks, he raised his power sword high above his head and brought it down with all his strength. Through sheer luck, he struck the suit's power source. An explosion rocketed the vault, blasting the two fighting sides away from each other. The blast brought the tunnel outside the weapon armory down, forcing the aliens to retreat with all haste. The few Tau trapped on the wrong side of the collapse were quickly slaughtered. At Verhasselt, there was no trace in the vault, leading the Astartes to believe he was either buried underneath the rubble or he'd been evacuated. All hoped it was the former. 2 weeks passed without further battle, the trapped alliance licking their wounds and preparing for the inevitable moment the Tau tunneled through the debris to finish them off. When finally the sounds of digging reached them, the warriors inside the vault prepared for their defiant end. Their surprise was complete when the Vox came back to life. Enough of the debris cleared to allow a signal to get through. Forge, the chief tech marine, voxed the men inside the vault, asking for signs of life. He brought the welcome news that they were digging them out. The Tau had abandoned the invasion and completely pulled out several days earlier when an Imperial fleet arrived in the system. The real shock was the identity of the rescuer, Rabuti Guilliman. A crusade had reached them, led by one of the Emperor's own sons. He congratulated the Rampant Lions on their stalwart defense and said it would have made his brother Dawn proud. His fleet was engaged near the edge of Ultramar when the astropathic call for aid was received. He had come as quickly as possible, but continued fighting and troubled warp travel had meant a lengthy delay. Guilliman had little time to spare and would leave within the day. Men and equipment would be left behind to rebuild, including Geneseed and Primaris Marines. But the initial plan to invade the Tau Empire after having bled them dry on Lair would have to be abandoned. The Imperium had enough to deal with around invading new territories, but the sacrifice of the Rampant Lions had not been in vain. The Xenos were demoralized and would take years to recover. The Crusade left, leaving 1,000 Primaris Marines behind. When combined with a few hundred firstborn survivors spread throughout the collapsed tunnels of the Lion's Den, this meant they exceeded the limitations of the Codex Astartes. When the Ordo Xenos visited the chapter several months later for debriefing, they left the matter for what it was. Mankind lived in a new reality and was in dire straits. A chapter having bought its loyalty, which so much spilled blood, could be trusted with a few hundred additional Marines, with the understanding, of course, that many of the new recruits would serve as Deathwatch operatives. An Inquisitor and his retinue stayed behind to help with the rebuilding of the chapter and to use the Lion's Den as a forward operating base for Deathwatch operations into the Tau Empire in the nearby future.